Joining us now, however, we turn in these difficult times facing the country in the wake of a confusing Supreme Court ruling and the emergence of an arrest of the Cardinals' second-round draft pick. Once again, the convergence of law and sports happens. We call upon our guy, Byron, Browne of the Browne Law Group, the anti-lawyer. Joining us now, he's our official Fox Sports 910 legal expert via the Sanderson Ford hotline. Byron, how you doing, man?
I'm good. How are you, Jody?
I'm doing great. I'm curious to pick your brain on a couple topics. Let's start with the Christian Kirk story. First of all, in the report, he was arrested. One of the officers attributed his demeanor to being that of consistent with a person on a stimulant such as cocaine. What does that mean legally when a cop suspects somebody to be on a substance? Does it mean they actually get tested for that substance, or are we just sort of at the mercy of that cop's professional judgment?
We're at the mercy of that cop's professional judgment, unless, of course, he was driving a vehicle and then they would do a field sobriety test to determine whether he was driving under the influence. But in this case, he's walking through a parking lot or down the street and throwing rocks at a vehicle. So in that set of circumstances, they're not going to test him for whether he's really on anything or not.
That's interesting to me. So even when they suspect it, there's no legal compulsion that they can to test you for that. You're just suspected of it.
Exactly. Yeah, the only thing would be, again, I guess if anything's accompanying him on his person,
Gotcha.
such as, he's holding a bag of something illegal, then that would come into play. But yeah, like if you're just, high as a kite walking down the street, not doing anything, and even if they suspect you of being high on something that's illegal, they couldn't do anything about it unless, of course, your behavior presents a danger to yourself or others.
How much weight does an observation or accusation like that carry from an officer in the court of law or amongst just in general?
Well, in a court of law, most officers are going to be able to testify as an expert within their field based upon their years of experience and training. So in a court of law, it's likely that an officer is going to be able to testify as what he put in that report, that the guy looked like he had a rough jaw and he was exhibiting other behavior that would lead him to conclude that someone was on a substance such as cocaine. And to be honest, even the law allows regular people to testify in a court of law if they determine, based upon our own observations, that someone is under the influence of a substance.
Interesting. Byron Browne joining us here on The Drive, Fox Sports 910 Phoenix, reacting to the Christian Kirk arrest. And at this point, Byron, it doesn't sound like there's much of a course of punishment that the franchise or NFL can take, considering it happened in that period between out of college before he got into the NFL. But do you think there's a chance that he could face some sort of NFL punishment?
I don't think he's going to. Again, unless for some reason he was subjected to testing and they determined that, and again, if we're talking about the drug component, I don't think anything's going to come of it. As it relates to the, which I'm assuming is going to be a misdemeanor property damage charge or disorderly conduct charge, I'd be surprised if something came from that. As far as a suspension or something goes, I could see them fining him. But under the circumstances, it's kind of like what Conor McGregor did by throwing that dolly, although different, is it's likely, I think, that all those charges are going to be dropped based upon an assumption or it actually happening that he paid, for the property damage that he caused to the vehicles. And as long as he does that, and again, the report seems, from what I've read, that he has no prior history. So under those circumstances, I think what the district attorney would do would make sure that he's paid for, all the damage he caused and apologized, and then they're going to drop everything. And based off of that, I think that's another reason why we're going to see the league not really do anything.
So it sounds like this is a bigger deal just in terms of the surprise of a player who was viewed as a, whistle clean character guy. It's more of a reaction to the fact that he got arrested than the severity of the actual arrest.
I think so. And, unfortunately, in the climate we live in, we're used to hearing things that are monumentally bigger than this, right? And so we've even heard the Coach Wilkes come out and say, hey, listen, we're not really going to be worried about a call in the middle of the night of someone doing something crazy in Scottsdale. And I think that's almost the climate we're in is, those sort of things are expected, even though it's unfortunate, we'd like it not to happen. And I think these sort of things we're going to see people maybe pay a little attention to, but then it'll kind of go by the wayside, and we'll see, because there's much more bigger fish to fry, so to speak.
I feel like I'm in confession here talking to our Fox Sports 910 legal expert. I was actually involved in a rock-throwing incident at vehicles myself. The difference is I was in 6th grade, and the cop did not arrest me. They just told us how stupid it was and called our parents. I would imagine that's the biggest thing. This is just an idiotic thing for a future professional football player to be caught doing. We know it's not serious, but something serious could have happened. I still remember the words of the officer when I was in 6th grade. You could have caused an accident and gotten someone killed. I just kind of look at this story. I'm like, how could he be that dumb? Like, that's just such a stupid thing to do.
Yeah, and I think where we're going to see it more come into play is, if he does something again in the future,
right,
they're going to look back on this, and everybody's going to say with hindsight, hey, listen, that was a telltale sign of behavior to come. But again, if he doesn't do anything ever again, which most of the time for first offenders and small infractions like this, the law is going to kind of let you skate to some degree, much like happened to you in grade 6. But unless something else happens, then what, in criminal law they do is they bring back up these other charges as magnifiers for your current charge. So that's what we could see happen. But again, knock on wood, hopefully this is the only thing that ever happens and we never hear about it again.
I'm just relieved that I was in some on rock-throwing watch list. I didn't get a phone call, so apparently I've done enough good between then and now to clear my good name. Let's talk about the Supreme Court groundbreaking ruling, sports betting. Does this mean that people are going to be able to bet on sports in Arizona legally anytime soon?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, I guess, is now what they've done by striking down that being the Supreme Court, striking down what they found to be unconstitutional in the Professional and Amateur Sports Protection Act, is left it up to states to regulate itself, essentially, as it relates to sports betting. So before, the only exception was carved out was Nevada, and then we know New Jersey's been chomping at the bit, and there's some other states that have proposed legislation hoping that what has happened, and that being like Delaware, Mississippi, New York, Pennsylvania, and West Virginia. So those states, we might be able to see sports gambling within the next 90 days. But just because this has happened doesn't mean it's automatic that we're able to bet. All the Supreme Court has said is, hey, listen, this being gambling within states isn't within the federal government's purview of power under the Constitution. So the federal government trying to enact law or regulate it in any fashion is improper. So we're going to leave it to the states. So now the states have the ability to regulate themselves, set up whatever sort of system they want as far as taxing interstate betting goes. But that's still, they're going to have to pass this law within the legislature. So those states that have kind of got ahead of the curve, we're going to be able to see things happen in those states relatively quickly. And again, I guess the Arizona legislature could get this up and going relatively quickly, but it's going to be something that they have to set up and get approved through the proper channels before anyone's allowed to bet in the state. So, I mean, technically we could see it really soon, or, it could be years before we see it.
Last question for our guest here, Byron Browne of the Browne Law Group, our Fox Sports 910 legal expert. Are there any limitations, or is this like free-for-all? You're going to be able to bet on all the prop bets that are in the Super Bowl? Are there any sort of limitations to this ruling?
No, there's no limitations. That's what the Supreme Court said is, listen, the federal government can't do anything on this particular area, which is sports betting within each respective state. So states themselves now can regulate it however they see fit, so they could put limitations on it. But again, it's going to be dependent upon whatever the specific state legislature passes as it relates to regulations on state betting, on sports betting within the state.
Great stuff as always. Our official Fox Sports 910 legal expert, Byron Browne of the Browne Law Group. You can check out his website, BrowneLawGroup.com. The anti-lawyer, Byron Browne, you kill as always, man. Appreciate your time very much.
Thank you, sir.